Hey everyone, welcome to the video series Dream Big, Pray Hard, Never Quit. Today we have got with us Dr. David Rendall. So thank you so much for being here. And before you start, I'm actually going to go and say a few words because in the book I wrote, he was mentioned. And, I believe I'm one of those people that believe in your life, certain people come across your life and probably don't even realize what they did. And I have a feeling you probably don't. I've told you this story before. But he was my professor when it was Mount Olive College. And I was going to school, I think it was on Thursdays, one night a week. And you were my professor there. And I was about 36, so this is about 13 years ago. And he wrote something on one of my papers. The class was just about over. And I had never even thought, getting a bachelor's degree to me was a dream come true.
Big deal, yeah.
Yeah, it was a big deal. But you wrote on my paper, one of my papers I turned in, and I know you probably don't even remember it. And he said, "You're pretty good at this. You should go get your master's." And that literally boosted my confidence into another stratosphere.
Yeah.
And because of that, the confidence that I got in myself in education, because I never really thought of myself as a good student. I went on and I got my master's and I went on and got my EDS, but it was something that you just took 2 seconds out of your way to write something.
Yeah.
And it literally changed my world to what I'm doing now. I went after and I started chasing my dreams because that confidence, and then the more I did, the more I realized I could do.
Yeah.
So I truly appreciate that. And now that I got you on camera and there's people out there, and now they can actually see you and say, hey, this is the guy who kind of started all this for me. And I greatly appreciate it. It's amazing. And I'm so glad that you came out here today to be part of this. So I said what I wanted to say. What do you got?
Well, that's my favorite kind of story. I mean, one of the things when you teach classes one night a week, when you now I'm a keynote speaker, when you go, you talk for an hour and then you leave, is oftentimes you don't know the next step, right? You tried to have an impact, you tried to make a difference, but you don't know the end of the story. And so the fact that we've been able to connect since then,
right?
Those are, it's good to get paid. It's good to be able to have success in your work, but it's also nice when it matters, when it makes a difference with somebody. And there were people who did that for me. I remember I took a graduate course. I think it was like a correspondence course back in the day where it was only even audio. They didn't even have online courses back then. And the guy, put on one of my papers. Yeah, I was a graduate course. He's like, you could totally do this. You could get your master's. You could get a doctorate. And there's a few people that I remember doing that with, because I think sometimes that's actually a psychological principle. Usually people who have a lot of ability are smart enough to realize all the things they can't do, and so they actually lack confidence.
Right.
And people who actually don't have a lot of ability and are actually poor performers at work and poor performers at school, they think they're amazing. They think they're crushing it. And so it seems weird that oftentimes the people who need the encouragement are the ones that are doing well, because they're at least smart enough to realize all the things they don't know and all the things that they're not good at. And other people don't have that awareness. So like, I think I'm nailing it, and they're not. And they have a hard time accepting negative feedback because they feel like they're doing so well. And so it's always nice when you can give somebody that feedback, and it does, give them that confidence to go forward.
I also remember in our class you had, I don't know if you had just written The Freak Factor or how old it was, but I remember you talking about you writing a book, and he has written several books since then, but one of them's The Freak Factor, and it's actually done very well.
Yeah.
And that was the confidence. I was sitting there thinking, well, he wrote a book. I want to write a book. And it was many years later, but again, because of the confidence, I went out and wrote a book because you did it.
Yeah.
So what I kind of want to do today is just take a few minutes and kind of go and talk about what you've done. Was it yesterday you just finished Ironman?
Saturday.
Yeah. So, and how many have you done now?
That was number 5.
5.
Yeah.
Now I remember you posting something on Facebook several years ago about, you couldn't do back in high school you couldn't do pull-ups or this or that, and now I'm sitting there and I'm watching you going through the finish at Ironman and doing all kinds of wonderful things and speaking all over, not just all over the country, but you speak all over the world. And kind of tell us how all that started, because I knew you as a professor at Mount Olive, and then I graduated and moved on, and then you moved on, and then somehow a few years ago we kind of through a mutual friend kind of got back in touch with each other. So kind of fill in that gap.
It's a lot of gaps. Well, I mean, let's start really early, because I mean that's where, I mean, talk about confidence. I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, my story starts as a young kid, always in trouble at school, couldn't sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told. You've taught, you know what that's like. That doesn't make you popular with the teachers. So I was, always told I was obnoxious and rebellious and inappropriate and immature and had no self-discipline and no self-control. And I thought they were right. I wasn't one of those people who was like, I'm going to show them. I was like, oh, well, you're an adult. You know what success looks like. You're telling me I won't have that success. I'm terrible. My parents called me motor mouth. My parents were very strict with discipline. They were constantly reminding me that I talk too much and I need to learn to sit still and be quiet and do what I was told. I went to very strict religious churches where your behavior was very closely monitored, and I was always told I was rebellious and fighting against God. And so I didn't just feel like I had bad behavior, I felt like I was a bad person, as I grew up, when I went to work, you talk too much and you need to calm down, and you're pushing your agenda too much. You need to be more willing to do what other people want you to do and follow the rules. And gradually, as I moved through my career, I realized, wait a second, when I stand up in front of people at a Chamber of Commerce banquet, because I was volunteering at the Chamber of Commerce, when I stand up in front of people at a community leadership program, because I went through the program and then volunteered to help, I can make people laugh. People seem to like it. I like it. I'm standing up. I'm not sitting down. I'm talking. I'm not being quiet. I'm doing my own thing and taking the initiative, not doing what other people want me to do. And I just had this realization one day, probably in my early 30s, late 20s. Wait a second. What if my weaknesses, what if those things that people spent their whole life telling me were the worst things about me were actually directly related to the best things about me? I can't sit still because I have a lot of energy and I want to be standing up. I can't be quiet because I have so much that I want to say. I don't want to do what other people want me to do because I got dreams of my own that I want to pursue.
Exactly.
And that's when I came up with the Freak Factor. I mean, just started sharing it. You probably were in on the very early stages. I may not have even written the book right away, because initially it was like a 9-minute, hey, I wonder if this is true, lobbing it out there to the students, getting some feedback, starting to add stories and things like that. And I just started to realize it wasn't just true for me, it was true for other people. There's amazing stories about billionaires with dyslexia who say they're successful because of their dyslexia, not in spite of it. So I started to realize that this wasn't just my story, this was everyone's story. And so I wrote the book, and started speaking about it. And pretty soon it was the only thing people wanted me to talk about. I mean, initially I'd talk about whatever people would pay me for. Hey, can you talk about leadership? Can you talk about persuasion? Can you talk about teamwork? Can you talk about time management? So my business initially was just speaking to people about anything they asked about. But once I added the freak factor as a topic, it was so unusual and so interesting. And then once I would talk about it, then people would tell someone else, and then they'd ask me to speak about it, and then they'd tell somebody else, and they'd ask me to speak about it. And so that's what happened. As a college professor, I got my first client doing a free talk for the alumni board, because one of my fellow employees said, hey, Dave, she'd probably asked all the other people when they were new, right? She'd run out of people to do these free talks on the Saturday morning. And I did it, and I met my first client at a community bank. He was the chief financial officer. And he said, hey, can you help us with strategic planning? And I started doing that. One time, a fellow professor had signed up to help the Greenville chapter of the Association of Training and Development, and said, hey, I got a bail last minute. Can you sent out an emergency email? I said, sure, I'll do it. And there were 6 people at the event. It wasn't a big deal. But it was a big deal, because I did my talk, and this lady came up to me. She was a training manager for a huge multinational mining company, and I've been doing training and coaching for them ever since. So gradually, through word of mouth, and people sharing the message with other people and it having an impact on people, just like I was able to connect with you while you were a student. The business started growing. I got more and more referrals, doing more and more speeches in more and more places. And 2013, so I started teaching in 2004, 2013. I quit to do this full time because I couldn't keep doing both, and the business was something I was much more passionate about. I was having a much bigger impact, and it was, to be honest, I have 3 kids. It paid the bills better than teaching did. Yeah. And so I don't know, going back to your thing about dreams, my dream actually wasn't to be a speaker. I didn't know speaking was a thing, My dream was to be an athlete. My dream was to be a professional football player. And then when I graduated high school, I was 6'4", 145. So you can imagine why I wasn't a football player. I had to stop at 6th grade. They didn't want me anymore. But I had a scholarship for basketball. But even at that weight, I was played at the really low level of NAIA basketball. I wanted to be a basketball player. I wanted to be a baseball player. I wanted to be a professional athlete. But if you think about that, what I dreamed about was running that touchdown back and having the crowd go crazy, right? That was my dream.
So many people.
Yeah.
So many people have that dream.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that there were other sort of routes. And so the speaking has really been a way for me to take who I really am and accomplish something that I never even really knew was possible. I think part of my dream was to do my own thing, to be in charge of my own life. That was part of that piece, right? When I was a kid, it was called rebellious. When you're an adult, it's called taking the initiative. It's called leadership.
That's right.
It's called taking charge. It's called being an entrepreneur.
Right.
Nobody wakes up in the morning and tells you to do the stuff that you're doing in here. Nobody forces you to. Nobody demands it of you. It's personal drive. It's personal initiative. But when that drive and initiative conflicts with what my parents or my teachers or my bosses wanted, then I'm a bad person. And so I think my dream was always to see if my way worked. And once I got that confidence from seeing my weaknesses might be strengths, and I started trying it and I was having that kind of success. So the other day, I probably came the closest that I've ever been to being a professional athlete. So I got to speak in Jenks, Oklahoma. It's just outside of Tulsa. The event was at Oral Roberts University in their arena where they play basketball games and things like that. And there were 1,600 teachers and administrators and staff people from this school. And I was down on the floor and they were just freaking straight up.
16,000.
And all the way over 1,600.
1,600.
I wish it was 16,000.
16,000,
wow. They had part of it closed off.
Still, 1,600 is good.
And I mean, it was massive. And I'm down there and there's lights and there's the stage. And when I would tell a joke and they would laugh, it would just last for like 15 seconds. My speech took twice as long as it normally would. And it was just the most... it was just the adrenaline started flowing. It was the most probably one of the most exciting situations that I've ever been in. And that's what I realized, sometimes we have dreams that aren't realistic in one way or another, and that are never going to come true. But there's elements of that dream, right? Teachers would call me out in class and say, Dave, I guess you just want to be the center of attention, don't you? And what I tell people is I want to invite them to something like that and be like, ta-da. I did want to be the center of attention. Right. There's nothing wrong with that. And so I think there's a lot of those elements of being a professional, being under the lights, being the person that the crowd is focusing on, making people cheer, making people laugh, being a performer just in a different way than I imagine. Because sometimes I think our dreams aren't even as big as they could be because there's certain things we're not even aware of.
Exactly
I didn't know speaking was a thing. I didn't know you could get paid to do that. And I didn't know I had a gift to do it. I didn't know that I'd be good at that sort of thing. Again, people spent their whole life telling me to shut up. And so I think that's a big part of it, is that I do feel like I'm living my dream. I wanted to run my own business. I wanted to write a book, and I wrote a book. And then I think when you achieve those dreams, I love what you said earlier, when you achieve that dream, when I did my first marathon, I wasn't so much excited that I'd done a marathon, like I was going to walk through life going, hey, look at me, I did a marathon. It was more that, just like you when you got your master's, then you're like, well, if I can get a master's, I can write a book. If I can write a book, I can start a business. If I can start a business. What I thought when I finished my first marathon is, if I can do that, I wonder what else I can do.
Exactly.
Right? And so that's what I try to do, is give people that confidence that you're not broken, you're not damaged, that these messages that people oftentimes don't want us to achieve our dreams because they gave up on their dreams so long ago. We'd make them feel terrible if we were achieving our dreams.
We remind them of what they couldn't do.
Yeah.
And so they try to hold you back.
Yeah.
And and I get the same thing with Dream Big. I have people telling me,
I can't.
what are you doing? What are you trying to prove? Why do you do these
Yeah.
videos? You've
Yeah.
got this, and and I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever. You keep living your mediocre life.
Yeah.
Well, I keep trying to make something out of mine
Yeah.
and help other people achieve more with their life.
Yeah, one of the most devastating things I ever heard, I got to speak at North Carolina Association of Adult Education. I was one of the speakers, and I sat through the day, and somebody got up and presented research on why first-generation college students struggle to stay in school and struggle to succeed. And I thought, well, they don't have the support system that they need, because they don't have other people in their family who've gone through school. So you can't have that basic help. Like when my kids need help with school, I can help them. I got a master's and a doctorate. I understand school, right? I used to be a teacher. My wife used to be a teacher. We can help. So I'm like, okay, they don't have support. That was my guess. And the lady said, it's not just a lack of support. It's active discouragement from family member and friends. People look at the person, and instead of saying, isn't that awesome that you're going and hitting that target, you're achieving that goal, you're accomplishing something the rest of us never could, you're setting a new standard for the family, they go, oh, I guess you think you're special now. Oh, I guess our life isn't good enough for you. Oh, I guess you think you're hot stuff because you're so smart. And so they're actively pulling the person down. One of the quotes from my first book on leadership was from Mark Twain, and he said, keep away from people who belittle your ambitions. Small people always do that. But the truly great make you feel that you too can become great. And I think that's my job as a teacher. That's why your story was so exciting to me. A lot of teachers walk in and the message is, I'm successful, you're not. I'm up here, you're down here. I know things and you don't. You're supposed to listen, I'm supposed to talk. When I think the real success is lifting people up. But listen to that quote, keep away from people who belittle your ambitions. Small people always do that. But the truly great make you feel that you too can become great. The small person wants to keep you smaller so they can feel big. Right? And when you get big, it makes them feel small and they feel bad about themselves. And instead of being inspired, like with you, instead of saying, oh, Dave wrote a book, I could write a book, they go, oh, he wrote a book, I guess I'm not special because I haven't written a book, and I guess some people do great things and other people don't, and I guess I'm terrible. That you can take two lessons from the very same thing.
Exactly.
Right? And so what great people do is they help other people find their greatness and try to lift them up. And that's why I talk about the freak factor, because I wish when I was a kid in high school, someone would have come to my high school and done that. I wish someone would have told my teachers that. I wish someone would have told my parents that. I wish some people would have told my bosses that. So I'm on a mission to help people hear it as soon as they possibly can and to influence as many lives as possible. One cool thing I got to do recently is you talk about helping people that maybe don't have confidence. I got to speak recently at a educational conference for teachers who teach inside of prisons and juvenile justice facilities. I was like, wow, these are people that a lot of society has given up on, and these teachers are going in there and giving these people opportunity to turn their lives around, but often still seeing them as, you're a little bit less of a person and you make bad choices and you're a criminal.
Right.
You just put that label on them. And when I show people that weaknesses could also be strengths, they go, oh, wait a second, this person, they were a criminal, but they took risks. Entrepreneurs take risks. They influence people and organize people to get things done. Leaders influence people and organize people to get things done. And so you start to change your perspective on people that other people have given up on. And when you can give them that hope, when you can give them that confidence, when everybody else is telling them you probably don't have anything to offer, which is part of why people end up going back to crap. I have no other options.
Right.
But wait a second, I can now dream a new dream about my potential future. And so that kind of stuff just really fires me up, because when you can speak to a group and the people in that room are going to go and reach out to then hundreds and thousands of other people, that's inspiring. Yeah,
it is. It was so funny. Today I gave a test in class, and I gave a test yesterday, but today we were doing presentations, and some of them were bad because they didn't try. And I stopped when they were doing them, and I said, look, I don't know what all your other teachers expect, but you're in my class, and I'm going to push you to excellence.
Yeah.
I said, so do what you want to in the other classes, but when in my class, you're going to do your absolute best, and I'm going to make sure I push you to your absolute best. Yeah. And to see their eyes light up, and to someone go, wait a minute, you're not going to accept mediocrity? You're going to make me do better than what I might do when someone else is. When people get that hope and they realize that someone's there to push them and make them better, they try harder.
Well, that's part of what I would try to communicate to people sometimes is I would talk to them about their poor performance, for example. And they go, well, you just don't like me or whatever. I said, whoa, wait a second. I said, if I didn't think you had what it took, I wouldn't be having this conversation. If I thought you were a lost cause, I wouldn't talk to you. The only reason I'm talking to you is because I think you do have the ability to turn it around. If I thought, oh, this is just a bad paper and you're just a bad student, then I would just give you a bad grade and walk away. I'm talking to you because I think you have the potential to do this if you're willing to put in the effort. But if I didn't think you had the potential, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I'm not bad-mouthing you or criticizing you. I'm trying to help you. And that's a hard lesson to learn sometimes too. Some people, you do need to support and encourage, but other people do need to push because no one's been willing to do that, and no one's cared enough to do it. That's the thing. Sometimes caring is to push someone, and that's part of the strength-weakness thing that I talk about. Some people's, sort of strength-weakness combination is they might say, some people are going to say to you, when they come back to you after school, hey, RJ, thanks for pushing me. And other people are going to go, oh, that RJ is a little bit of a jerk because he pushes you. You're never going to win them all. Meanwhile, some other teacher, somebody's going to say, oh man, that teacher was so nice and she was just what I needed, super compassionate, super understanding, super sensitive. And someone else is going to go, that teacher was nice to everybody. She didn't push you though. I needed someone to push me. We're not the right kind of person for everybody.
No, exactly right.
And you can't say, oh, I'm going to be super soft and sensitive and delicate with some of the kids, and I'm going to be super tough and push. That's a dream that everybody has, is that you can somehow magically figure out what everybody needs. At some point, we have our personality, we have our style, we have our way of doing things. And if you push, and that's going to work with enough people that's worth doing. And if you stop doing that, you'd lose the benefit that some of those people would lose that benefit that you can provide. So we have to not be ashamed to be ourselves and to know that you're not the right person for every student, but you're the right person for some students, and your style is going to work and it's going to change their lives.
Exactly. And let's talk about how you've pushed yourself. I mean, the going and writing the book and the Freak Factor, and you also have a book that you co-authored, Pink Goldfish. And we'll get back to that in just a second. But I want them to also know, just besides education and motivation, you go out and motivate yourself through what you've accomplished athletically. You said I always wanted to be an athlete, but you're sitting there 5 Ironmans now. That's a pretty good athlete.
Yeah.
So what made you get started in doing all that?
Well, I mean, it goes back to weaknesses and strengths. When I was a kid, they told me I was hyperactive, and now they say, wow, you did an Ironman, and all that is being really hyperactive. And so I just love it. I love being active. I love being on the move. I love pushing myself. I love challenging myself to achieve things. And when I did a 5K, I thought, I wonder if I can do a 10K. And I did a 10K, and I thought, I wonder if I could do a half marathon. And that, to get back to the beginning of that story, actually, it's when I moved here to North Carolina. I was really overweight. I had been teaching part-time while going to school to get my doctorate full-time, while working full-time, while raising 2 small children, and trying to maintain my marriage, and then moving down to North Carolina. And when all of that changed, when I was able to become a college professor, wasn't obviously teaching on the side, hadn't started my business yet, and had more free time for the first time, I was like, it's time to I've achieved these academic goals and these career goals. It's time to achieve some physical goals. So, I went, just started trying to run around the neighborhood, and I ran till I couldn't run, and then I walked, and then I ran until I couldn't run, and I walked, and I made it 3 miles in a really long time. And I signed up for a 5K, and after I did that, I trained and signed up for a 10K, and after I did that, I trained. And again, it's that if I can do that, I wonder what else I can do. Right. And as I dropped the weight and got healthier and started feeling better, and then I ultimately did a marathon, which I kind of thought, like, if I could do a marathon. But once I did the marathon, I'm like, okay, I did that. So what else can I do, right? And I think that's a good question. I think when we talk about dreaming big, sometimes it's about dreaming big, and then when you hit that thing that seems so big, asking what's next. One of the things that bothered me the most about being a college professor was those people who they'd gotten their doctorate, they became a professor, and that was their last accomplishment. Like, hey, 30 years ago I got my doctorate, and you're going to call me doctor. That's really the only thing I've ever done in my career was get that, and I feel like I'm done now. And so I kept setting new goals. So after I did a marathon, I started doing sprint triathlons, which are shorter ones, and then I did Olympic one, which is longer ones. Then I did ultra marathons, so I ran my first 40-mile race. I did a 50K, which is a 31-mile race. And then I went for the half half Ironman. Now there was a bunch of stuff that happened in between there. So, relevant to what you're talking about, never quit, there's a lot of chances to quit.
Tell me about that, was it just last year?
Yeah.
That you were in the hospital, you broke your foot.
Yeah.
I mean, you were laid up for quite some time.
Yeah, well, it starts before that. So
okay.
After training and doing 5 marathons, I was out here not too far from your house, and I got hit by a truck while I was running. And he took off took off my left elbow. And they had to take 2 giant screws, which are still in there, and they screwed my left elbow together. And I had to do a lot of physical therapy, and I'll never be able to extend my left arm all the way out again.
So running is dangerous.
Life. Yeah, running is dangerous. Okay. That's all you needed to know, right? That's all you needed to know, right? So, but here's the thing, never quit. I got hit 3 weeks before the marathon. It was my last long run before the marathon. And then what you do, what's called a taper, where you start running less to get your body ready to go do that thing. You don't want to go in exhausted to the marathon. And so I did a massive taper. I was sitting at home with screws in my arm and staples holding my arm together. But they took the staples out one week before the marathon and said, hey, your arm is screwed back together, so we're going to start working on it, doing physical therapy. You have no restrictions. I said, can I run the marathon? He goes, as long as you don't fall. So 3 weeks after getting hit by a truck, having surgery, having screws put in my arm, I ran that marathon because I don't quit, right? If it's possible, I'm not going to quit. 3 years ago, I was training for my second Ironman. And I was riding my bike not too far from here. And I was going about 25 miles an hour, just cruising, having a great time. I was out on a 100-mile ride, and I got attacked by some pit bulls. Hit them with my bike and was upside down before I knew it, hit my shoulder on the ground and cracked my shoulder, broke some ribs. Back in the hospital, having surgery, couldn't do that Ironman. But I said, after about 6 weeks, the doctor said, you can't swim, you can't bike, but if you want to start running again, you can start running. And so I set a goal to push myself with running, and I did my first 50-mile ultramarathon, and then did a 51-mile ultramarathon. And then within a year, I had done 2 full Ironmans after my shoulder healed, and I was able to get back on the bike and swim. I did Chattanooga in Florida in 2017. So
guys, if you're not motivated yet, I mean, I want to get out and do a marathon. I'm not in shape to do it, but I'm ready to go run one.
But that's, I mean, when they put me in the ambulance after I broke my shoulder, after I got attacked by those dogs, the EMT said, you need a new hobby. And people on Facebook said, you know what, Dave, you're getting older. There's no reason to get hurt like this. This is a sign that it's time to calm down and to slow it down. And people will say that to you, right? People, you got your dream or you're going to fight through. People love persistent people, but only after you've succeeded. And when something goes wrong, they want you to quit because they quit. They want you to stop because they stopped, or they play it safe. They want you to play it safe, and they want you to be reasonable. And so that's an easy thing to fall into. But the reason I didn't is because I'd already tried that. After college, when I was 24, I broke my leg real bad playing basketball. It was a super bad break. They had put screws in it. I was in a cast for months, and my leg never really got back to the way it was supposed to be. And I learned. I took that lesson. That's what I thought the lesson was. Time to grow up, be an adult. You're not an athlete anymore. I didn't exercise. I didn't do anything more than walk, and I wasn't even walking really to kind of stay fit. I never ran. I went 8 years after being an athlete my entire life, playing high school basketball, college basketball, baseball, everything I could get my hands on. I just stopped doing anything because I thought it's time to grow up and move on to a different part of life. And it wasn't until I moved here and started training for that first marathon that I'd done any sort of exercise in 8 years. And so I knew what it was like to just go, oh, hey, I guess you get hurt and that means it's time to stop. It's not for you. And I knew that wasn't the path. And so I was back on the exercise bike while I was in a sling. You can do that.
Right.
I was watching the Ironman World Championship yesterday. There's a guy named Tim Don, and he was at the Ironman World Championships just doing a practice ride, and he got hit by a car. And they had to put the halo on him where they he broke his neck. They had to screw the screws straight into his head. And after a month and a half, he was outside on his exercise bike in his garage, on the trainer, not riding out,
right.
but with the halo on. He couldn't wash his own hair. He couldn't put on a shirt, but he was riding that bike. And so I think it's easy, like you said, if you want to find excuses, they're out there.
Right.
And so what you were referring to was I did my third Ironman in 2017. I trained through into 2018. and I was set up to do 2 more Ironman races, one in Mont-Tremblant, Canada, and one in Maryland 6 weeks after that. And the day before the race, I was walking out to the beach to do a practice swim, and I just heard a loud crack in my foot. And apparently I'd been had some damage, and I was working on a stress fracture that I wasn't aware of, and the bones were just too stressed, and they broke. And so again, you can go, oh, well, here we go. I mean, how many injuries do you have to have before you finally quit, right? Before you finally decide this isn't for you. But one of the people who helped me was a race director for Florida, and he said, we'll make sure you get a free entry into the next year's race, which they didn't have to do and isn't one of their policies. Right. And so that kind of kept me going that whole time, because the foot injury led to a knee injury. The knee injury led to a hip injury, and I just wasn't able to come back. And it wasn't until about a month and a half before the race that I finally was able to start training. And I made it up there. The biking is really, really hard because it's in the mountains, and as you know, we don't live in the mountains. Right. It's all flat around here, and so I just wasn't ready for that. But I did the swim, and I thought, well, just see how far I can go on the bike. I managed to get the bike done just in time, and I walked the 26.2 miles because I knew I couldn't run on my foot. And I finished in 16 hours and 30 minutes. You only get 17 hours. But that was, you talk about not quitting. And there's a lot of times in 16 and a half hours where you're like, you know what? I'm ready to be done with this. I'm ready for this to be over. But my only goal, that also becomes clear on what your dream is. So my goal was to cross that finish line. I was there the year before. I was ready. I was in shape, and I didn't have the chance to finish. And I mean, it's an amazing finish line. Google it, Ironman Mont-Tremblant. I mean, it's like a nightclub. There's lights, there's fireworks. It's insane. There's hundreds of people talk about you're being an athlete again. Yeah. You're there on the same course that professional athletes are on, and these people are banging the sides, and they're clapping, and they're screaming, and you're running through this chute, and there's people everywhere. I wanted to experience that. That was my dream. But my dream was to finish. I finished 2,200th out of 2,270 people. There was only 70 people that finished after me, but my goal wasn't to beat those people. My dream wasn't to beat them. My dream was to cross the finish line. Right. And so sometimes we get distracted. We see that person who's thinner than us, they're stronger than us, they're faster than us, they're richer than us. None of that stuff matters. This isn't about me against you. This is about me against my dreams, right? My first marathon, I got passed by a woman who had a sign on her back that said she was pregnant. and I couldn't catch up to her. I was like, you got me, you win, right? But for all I know, she's 1 month pregnant and used to be an Olympic athlete. It's not about chasing that woman down. I was doing my dream, which was my first marathon, and I was doing pretty well. I was happy with that. Right. So I think we have to be clear about what our dream is, but also that never quit, because then when I finished Ironman Mont-Tremblant, that was about 6 weeks ago, and I was like, wait a second, my foot didn't break again. It actually felt pretty good. I was able to do it. I didn't get to do Maryland last year. Let's sign up for Maryland. So I signed up for Maryland with only 6 weeks to go. I was able to get in some extra training, and I just did that. I took an hour and 45 minutes off my time. I biked faster than I've ever biked in an Ironman before. Second fastest finishing time of any Ironman that I've done. Fastest biking time that I've ever done. Was able to check off my 5th one. And then I finished that one, and I signed up for Ironman Florida. I'm going to do Ironman Florida in 4 weeks from now, and try to hit number 6. And so, if somebody says, oh, that was a sign that you should have stopped, then how come I was able to do 2 more? That's right. How come I was able to get back in shape? It wasn't easy, but if you decide it's not possible, then you prove it's not possible by not attempting it, And so it's about pushing forward even when people think, that's not the reasonable thing to do.
And I think that's where people miss the dream. It's in the struggle, or the pray hard aspect, where they're like, it's too hard. It's too hard. And that's why, I'm guessing 75% of the people out there don't accomplish their dream. Yeah. Or they don't go on to, they maybe accomplished one, and then it got tough to accomplish the other one. They're like, you know what, I've done this. That's good enough. Yeah. And I think that's what we do. We try to push people beyond what they think they can do. Yeah. Because once they realize what they can do, their confidence takes over, and they realize they can do so much more.
Well, yeah, one of the things I did to motivate myself for my first Ironman, because one of my questions was, can I do it? That's a long way. For those people who don't know, you swim 2.4 miles, which is enough to cause some people to go, I'm out, right? Bike 112 miles, and then you wrap it up with a marathon. You just kind of cool down with a marathon. And so I when my friend was encouraging me to do it, I'd done a half, and it took me about 6 hours, but a full can take up to 17 hours. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And I started watching online videos of the Ironman World Championship that they have out in Kona, Hawaii. Mm-hmm. And I'd watch 75-year-old guys cross the finish line. I watched a 83-year-old woman cross the finish line. I watched people who are dramatically overweight, but less overweight than they used to be, cross the finish line. Watch a guy cross the finish line on 2 prosthetic legs after having them blown off. Watched one guy who was one of the elite athletes, finished in the top 10 the one year, broke his neck in between, became a paraplegic, and the very next year came back as a para athlete, doing the hand cycle, and doing the wheelchair, swimming with just his arms because he can't use his legs. He went through that. I'm paralyzed now, and didn't say, well, I guess I'm not supposed to do Ironmans. He said, all right, I'm going to win it the different way then.
Right.
And so when you watch that, you learn that the question isn't can I? The question is, am I willing to do what it takes to do it? But it's not, is it possible? Because you're not an 83-year-old woman. You're not a 75-year-old man. You didn't have both of your legs blown off in Iraq. You don't have as good of an excuse as you think you had. Yeah, my knees hurt a little. Yeah. That guy didn't have knees, you know. So we have these things that we think are just perfectly reasonable. You know, I've got them. I got screws holding my arm together. My left leg doesn't work right because of those screws holding it together. My ankle doesn't work, so I'm always off balance. I'm always imbalanced in the way that I run. My form isn't right. I'm always fighting things. I'm always having aches and pains that other people wouldn't have. I'm always having injuries that other people wouldn't have because my body doesn't work right. People say, how do you swim when that arm doesn't reach out? I just keep going off course and keep coming back on course. I don't know any different. But if I said, well, you know, I can't swim, I've got 2 arms, right? And that guy's out there with legs that don't work. I'm at least kicking and I got my arms. Yeah, I might go a little crooked here and there, but it's still possible, right? And so I think looking for those role models of who is doing it, what are they overcoming to do it, and I think that's part of what you try to bring in front of people, but they're always out there if you want to see them. But what's easier to find is those people who, oh, I'm not as bad as that guy, or I'm doing a little better than that person,
right?
Or I guess this is just the way life is sometimes. And so I think it is good to find those people, pay attention to the kinds of information that's out there where somebody is encouraging you to do better and be better, because that's out there if you want to look for it as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will look at, okay, well, I can do that. But then they see way beyond that and go, there's no way I can do that. And dreamers and achievers, they go and reach for the real big thing. And like, you know what, I can do that. I can do that.
Well, and I think that's what you can learn from Ironmans or marathons or anything like that. What I always tell people, let's just take a marathon, 26.2 miles. What I tell people is I've never run 26.2 miles. I can't run 26.2 miles. What I do is I run 2 miles, and then there's an aid station. They got some Gatorade, they got some water, they got little bananas, they got these little things that you can open up and squeeze basically some frosting into your mouth to give you a little energy. And I walk for a minute at that aid station, and then I run 2 more miles, knowing there's going to be another one of those aid stations. When I swam in my first Olympic distance triathlon, which is like 1/3 of an Ironman triathlon, I'd never swam a mile in my life, but they have these buoys, right? And you just got to get to the next one, and that was my goal. I didn't swim a mile. I swam to the next buoy, and then I swam to the next buoy. When I did my first marathon, I ran a 5K, I ran a 10K, I ran a half marathon, then I ran a full marathon. So I think we want to dream big, but then always ask, what's that for? I think sometimes we get lost, right?
Where's
it's
the
so
journey?
far. Yeah, it's so far out there. What's the next thing I can do? What's a small thing I can do? You didn't start with T-shirts and wristbands and mugs and a show, and you've started with something,
right?
Then you added something. Then you don't start. Nobody writes 5 books. You got to write one of them first.
That's right.
And nobody writes even that. You went to school. I went to school. Everybody's written a paper. People are like, how do you write a book? I'm like, you write about 15 papers. You wrote a paper probably in high school. It was probably 5 or 6 pages long. You write 10, 15 of those, you got yourself a book. It's just a series of papers. It's and mine didn't start. It started with blog posts,
Right.
5 minutes. Hey, I saw this thing on SportsCenter. This guy used to be an addict, and now he's addicted to triathlons. His weakness is really a strength. He's never going to calm down. He's never going to take it easy. But now he's doing positive things with his addiction instead of negative things with his addiction. Write that up. That becomes a story in the book. The book got written over a course of 3 years, little by little, taking small steps. So I think that's the thing. You got to dream big, but the never quit part is, what's the next thing I can do?
Right.
What's the next? I mean, Canada, my watch died because I was going so slow. It can only last so long. And when I was trying to finish that Ironman 6 weeks ago, and I shut it off tracking my progress just so I at least knew the time. But then they weren't telling you how many miles because it was Canada. They were telling you how many kilometers. So then I had to mentally figure out what the kilometers meant. And so I spent the whole night just trying to get to the next, 10 minutes to get to the next sign that says 30 kilometers. Then 10 minutes to get to the next sign that says 31. And I know if I could keep going that 10 minutes at a time, I'd make it to the end in time. I wasn't doing an Ironman. I was getting to the next. And that's the thing. If you stand there at the beginning of a race and go, do I have what it takes to go 140.6 miles? For most people, the answer is like, I don't think so.
Right.
But can I swim to that buoy? Probably. Can I swim to that buoy? Sure. Can I send that email? Can I call that person? Can I record my first show? Do it bad, right? Do a bad show.
Exactly.
I always tell people, write your first book so you can write a better one the second time. But you can't write that better one when you just have the idea for a book. So I think the starting, and then not even just the starting, but the never quitting is being able to say, well, I'd quit if I thought I had to make it all the way to there, but I don't have to make it all the way to there. I only have to make it to here, and then I'll refuel, and then I'll make it to the next spot. And that's the only way I really make it through. The only way make it through anything. I mean, I can't get booked for 4 years from now for a speech. I don't know. I don't have any guarantee that I'll be hired next October to do any speeches, but I can't worry about that right now. Right now is about September. Right now is about October. Right now is about November. Right now is about December. What can I do? How can I do the best I can do right now to make it possible that I'm going to keep succeeding in the future?
Now, how often, because you brought it up, number one, though, how often are you booked out now?
This year so far, I've done more than 80 presentations, and it's October 2nd, October 3rd. It's probably going to be my biggest year ever. I think my biggest year ever previously was a couple of years ago. I did 90. Last year I did 88. So this is easily, we still have 3 months to go, and
Right.
I've already done 80. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm sometimes in October here from the 22nd to the 25th, I'll do 5 presentations in 4 days.
Because, I mean, I follow you on Facebook, and
Yeah.
you're all over the place all the time.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love it. And I know you don't see it, but I watch a lot of what you do going, you know what? I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
So you keep doing what you're doing, because I watch you going.
Well, and
I'm gonna get
that is
there.
part of the reason I do it. I mean, when I finished my first Ironman, I had people who I didn't even really know say, "Hey, you inspired me to lose weight. You inspired me to get fit. You inspired me to." Sometimes, like you said, people are watching, but they're not talking to you about
Right.
it. And sometimes they also need to see that consistency. It's easy for someone to do one thing. It's easy for someone to have this big moment and then have it all kind of disappear. I think sometimes it's the consistency and the fact that you're there, you come back even when you encounter difficulty. It's not just a brief spurt. It's a long-term
Right.
effort, and that's what it's been for me. I mean, I didn't do 80 speeches the first time, right? I was doing talks for no pay,
Right.
in front of 6 people in a conference room without without a projector. But that led to a presentation, that led to a presentation, that led to a presentation. So I think that willingness to start, you can't quit until you've at least started, right?
That's
You can't
right.
never quit until you've at least
That's
started.
right.
Yeah.
So you've written how many books now?
Let's see. So the first one was the 4 Factors of Effective Leadership. Second one was, and I still have the $10 bill that a student at Mount Olive gave me to buy that book. I still have that $10 bill, and I've revised it and improved it since then. But I had that, have that book. So 4 Factors of Effective Leadership. Then I wrote the Freak Factor. Also updated and revised that one since
Right.
then to make it better. Wrote the Freak Factor for kids.
I remember. Yeah.
So it's turned it into a children's book. And then wrote Pink Goldfish. It's kind of applying it to marketing and strategy. Yeah.
So you have done, by most standards, out there living your dream.
Yeah.
Even though you didn't realize it was your dream,
Yeah.
it's turned into your dream.
Yeah.
I cannot thank you enough. I'm gonna be honest with you. I was more nervous about you coming here, because people wonder, well, who influences you? Who, because I have people come up to me and say, oh, you do this, you do that, and and it makes you feel good.
Yeah.
But we all have someone that we look to.
Yeah.
And, believe it or not, you're that person that I watch constantly going, I'm picking up ideas from you. I'm seeing what you do.
Sure.
So I appreciate you coming out here and being on the show. Really means a lot to me.
Well, let me say something to pull that together then, because I think that's cool, because I got your wristbands before I ever had wristbands.
And they're like,
So sometimes you're watching other people, but they're watching you too. And I've been inspired. This is, I just started my own online store a little while ago. I had these t-shirts made for myself and I would wear them, but then people would ask, can I get one? And I'm like, I don't really have a way to do that. And I finally went through the process of creating my own online store. So it goes both directions. And I think that's a good thing to remember. I think sometimes when we feel like we're here and someone else is there, when we make the effort to bring that person up, what we have to remember is sometimes people are going to go past us, and it becomes either a peer relationship or an opportunity for us to then be inspired by them. So I mean, you're doing some things. I mean, I don't record videos like this. I don't have all these t-shirts and hats and bracelets. And it has been something I've been thinking about more and starting to invest in is, wait a second, why am I wearing other people's stuff when I do stuff? Why am I promoting what other people are up to when I'm up to stuff that really matters? And so that's been really inspirational for me, and it's definitely had an impact on me as well. So it goes both directions.
Well, I appreciate that, but I was kind of in marketing most of my life. I kind of figured it out.
No, that's good. That's good.
Again, thank you so much. I'm just honored that you were willing to come out here and be on the show.
I'm glad you invited me.
Guys, thank you so much for watching another episode of Dream Big, Pray Hard, Never Quit.